My name is Leora Kerr, and I'm 24 years old. 6 months ago, my mother gave away my car, the SUV my grandmother had gifted me for my 24th birthday. Just like that. No discussion, no warning. She handed the keys to my younger sister, Camilla, and said, "She needs it more. You're single. You can just take Ubers." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight for what was mine. I just stood there and watched my car disappear from my life like I had never mattered in the first place. And then came my grandmother Margaret's 71st birthday. I showed up in an Uber. 40 relatives turned to look as I walked into that private dining room empty-handed, no car. No explanation. Just a quiet smile I forced onto my face. When my grandmother asked where my car was, my mother gave that same calm, confident smile and repeated the same words in front of everyone. Leora gave it to her sister. She knows Camilla needs it more. What happened next made every single person in that room realize they had completely underestimated both me and my grandmother. If this story has sparked your curiosity about what's coming next, consider subscribing, but only if it truly resonates with you. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what the weather feels like where you are right now. Just a quick note, this is a fictional story, with a few details enhanced using AI to make the experience more vivid and immersive. So go ahead, pour yourself a warm cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's continue. I grew up learning how to disappear in plain sight. Our family wasn't big, just my parents, my older sister Camilla, and me. My dad worked long hours as an accountant, quiet and predictable. My mom stayed home until we were older, then picked up a part-time job at a real estate office. We weren't rich, but we never struggled either. On the surface, we looked like a perfectly normal suburban family. Camilla was 4 years older than me, and, in many ways, she was everything my mother admired. She had my mom's golden hair, her bright green eyes, even her laugh. People used to joke they could pass as twins. I, on the other hand, took after my dad. Dark hair, softer voice, the kind of personality that watched more than it spoke. From as early as I can remember, Camilla was the center of everything. I was just there, if she wanted my toys. My mom would smile and say, "Leora, share with your sister. You're more flexible," if she wanted the bigger bedroom. The explanation was always ready. "Camilla has friends over. You understand?" Right. If our schedules ever clashed, mine was the one that quietly disappeared. I learned very young that being flexible didn't mean kind or understanding. It meant replaceable. By the time I turned 20, I had already started building a life outside of that house. I worked as a freelance content writer, completely remote. It paid enough for my apartment, my bills, my independence. I didn't need to ask anyone for anything anymore. But to my mom, it wasn't real. "When are you going to get a proper career?" she would ask at every family dinner, like it was part of the routine. "Camilla has a husband, a baby on the way." What do you have? Camilla married her husband, Julian Torres, at 24. By 25, she had a baby boy, Mateo. She was living the exact life my mother had always imagined for both of us. And me, I was the version that didn't quite make the final draft. Looking back, I can see it clearly now. Flexible was never a compliment in my family. It was just a softer word for someone they could overlook without guilt. And that car, that SUV I got for my birthday, I really believed it meant something had changed. It didn't. The truth is, the signs were already there long before the night everything exploded. About a year before my grandmother Margaret's birthday, she had been living alone ever since my grandfather passed away. She had just turned 70, still sharp, still independent, But suddenly everyone was concerned about her living alone. The idea of her moving closer started floating around, and as usual, my mother took control of the entire situation. She organized what she called a family discussion, which really just meant her, my dad, Camilla, and Julian sitting around the dining table making decisions for everyone else. I wasn't even there. I found out 3 days later. We talked about Grandma, my mom said casually over the phone, like she was telling me what she had for lunch. Camilla's going to check on her twice a month. Julian will take care of any repairs at the house. I waited, thinking she'd eventually include me. She didn't. What about me? I finally asked. I work from home. I could help with Sweetheart. She cut in, her tone already dismissive. You're so busy with your little computer thing. Let Camilla handle it. She's better with people anyway. Better with people. I stared at my phone long after the call ended. That familiar hollow feeling settling in my chest again. What my mother didn't know was that I had been talking to my grandmother Margaret every single Sunday for the past 2 years. Not quick check-ins, not polite conversations. Hours. We talked about everything. My grandfather, her garden, the novels she was reading, the memories she didn't share with anyone else, Camilla's visits, the ones my mom praised so much, rarely lasted more than half an hour. One afternoon during one of our calls, Grandma said something that didn't make much sense to me at the time. You remind me so much of your grandfather. Leora, she said softly. Quiet. But you notice everything. I laughed it off back then. I shouldn't have. Because she noticed everything too. Every phone call where my mother talked over me. Every holiday where Camilla's life became the center of attention. Every small moment where I was pushed aside in the name of practicality. She saw it all. She just didn't say anything yet. And somehow, she was the one person I had completely underestimated. By the time my 24th birthday came around, I wasn't expecting anything special. Maybe a card. Maybe dinner if my mom felt generous. I had learned not to expect more than the bare minimum. But that year, something felt different. A week before my birthday, my mom called me. Come over Saturday, she said. We've got something for you. I almost didn't go. I even thought about making up an excuse about work. But there was something in her voice. A warmth I wasn't used to hearing. That made me curious. When I arrived, everyone was already there. My parents, Camilla, Julian, and their little boy Mateo, and in the driveway sat a navy blue SUV, wrapped in a massive red bow. I stopped walking. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Happy birthday, Leora, my mom said, stepping forward and placing the keys in my hand, smiling like she had just done something extraordinary. We wanted you to have something reliable. My fingers trembled as I held the keys. Camilla had gotten her first car at 22, right after she graduated. I was 24. And for the first time in my life, it felt like maybe, just maybe, things were finally becoming fair. I was 24, and I had spent years relying on buses and rideshares just to get through my day. I had stopped expecting fairness a long time ago. I had stopped expecting anything at all. But standing there in that driveway, holding those keys, something shifted inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I actually mattered. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my grandmother Margaret standing near the garage, watching quietly. When our eyes met, she smiled. It wasn't her usual gentle smile. There was something deeper in it, something knowing. Your grandmother wanted you to have a car, my mom added casually. Like it was a small detail. She thought it was time. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. That car wasn't just a way to get around. It was the first time in 24 years that I felt seen, like I wasn't just Camilla's shadow anymore, like I actually had a place in this family. For 10 months. I drove that SUV everywhere. Grocery runs, late-night drives, quiet afternoons when I just needed to clear my head. I made it mine. Every corner of it carried a piece of my life. And then, Camilla's car broke down. Everything changed. 3 weeks before my grandmother's birthday, I drove over to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. Camilla's minivan was in the driveway like always. Nothing seemed out of place at first, until I glanced into the garage, and my stomach dropped. There it was. My SUV. The navy blue paint unmistakable, the red ribbon long gone. But there was no mistaking it, except now. There was a child's car seat strapped into the back. Not mine. Not my life. I walked into the kitchen, my pulse already racing. My mom was standing at the stove, stirring something that smelled like her usual pot roast. "Mom, why is my car in the garage?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, Camilla needed to borrow it. Her car's in the shop. Borrow it just for a few days." "Honey?" she said lightly. "The mechanic said about a week." I wanted to argue right then. I wanted to ask why no one had called me, why this had been decided without me. But before I could say anything, Camilla walked in carrying Mateo, cooing and laughing as he reached for her necklace, and just like that, the moment slipped away, replaced by baby talk, dinner plates, and forced normalcy. A week passed. No car. 2 weeks passed. Still nothing. I finally texted Camilla, "Hey, any update on your car? I need mine back soon." Hours later, she replied, "Mechanic says another week. Thanks for understanding." Understanding. I called my mom. "When am I getting my car back?" A pause. Then her voice changed. Colder now. "Leora, don't be difficult. Camilla has a child. She needs reliable transportation. You work from home? You can just Uber." "That's not the point. It's my car. It's just a car." She snapped. "Don't be so materialistic." I felt my chest tighten. "Your sister needs it more," she continued, sighing like I was the problem. "You're single. You're flexible. You understand." There it was again. Flexible. "Mom, I didn't agree to this. We'll talk about it later." She cut in and hung up. I stared at my phone, my reflection faintly staring back at me from the dark screen. Anger and disbelief twisted together in my chest. This wasn't borrowing anymore. This was theft, dressed up as generosity. The next day, I called Camilla directly. "Camilla, we need to talk about the car." "What about it?" she said. Distracted. I could hear Mateo crying in the background. "It's been 2 weeks. I need it back." There was a pause. "Mom said I could use it." She finally replied, "I thought you were okay with it." "No one asked me if I was okay with it." "Well?" She hesitated. "I mean, you don't really need it." "Right. You work from home." I gripped my phone so tightly my fingers hurt. "That's not the point. It's mine. You should have asked me, Leora." "I have a toddler," she snapped, her patience thinning. "Do you know how hard it is to get him to daycare, to doctor's appointments, to everything? I know your life is hard," I said quietly. "Have you ever been in a situation where something that rightfully belonged to you was taken away, and everyone expected you to just accept it quietly? If you've ever gone through something like this, leave the number 1 in the comments. That doesn't mean you get to take my things," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not taking anything," Camilla snapped, her tone sharpening instantly. "You're being dramatic. It's just a car. Then give it back." There was a pause on the line. A long one. "Mom said we could talk about it at Grandma Margaret's party." She finally replied, "We'll figure it out then." Okay, before I could say another word, she hung up. I sat there in my apartment, staring at the Uber app glowing on my phone screen. And for the first time, something inside me tightened in a way I couldn't ignore. If I stayed quiet now, this wouldn't stop. It would happen again. And again. Every time Camilla needed something, my mom would offer up whatever belonged to me, my time, my space, my life. I would always be the one expected to adjust, to be flexible, forever. That night, I made a decision. I would talk to my mom at my grandmother's birthday, calmly, privately, like adults. I would explain how this felt, draw a line, and take back what was mine. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted respect. What I didn't realize was that my mother had no intention of keeping this private. The day of my grandmother Margaret's 70th birthday arrived wrapped in perfect autumn weather, clear skies, cool air, the kind of day that looked peaceful on the surface. The celebration was held at the Willow Grand, one of those restaurants that didn't need to announce its price tag. White tablecloths stretched across every table, crystal chandeliers hung above, and the staff moved quietly, almost invisibly, between guests. My mom had reserved a private dining room for 40 people, extended family, distant cousins, aunts and uncles I only saw once a year, but who still felt entitled to comment on my life. I arrived in an Uber. The driver pulled up to the entrance, and I took a moment before stepping out. I smoothed down my emerald dress, inhaled slowly, and told myself to stay calm. Then I saw it. My SUV, parked just a few spaces from the entrance. The navy blue paint caught the light instantly. Impossible to miss. But what made my chest tighten was the sticker on the back window, a bright baby on board sign I had never bought. And through the glass, I could see a child's car seat strapped in place. Camilla and Julian were just getting out. Mateo squirmed in Julian's arms, fussing with the tiny bow tie around his neck. Camilla spotted me and waved, her expression completely normal, like nothing was wrong. "Leora, you look amazing," she said as I walked closer. "Did you Uber?" I forced a smile, one that felt sharp and fragile at the edges. "Convenient." "Right," I replied. "So convenient." If she noticed the tone in my voice, she didn't show it. "Come on," she said lightly. "Mom's been stressed all morning about the seating." Julian gave me a small, awkward nod before following her inside. Mateo's soft whining echoed behind them as the door closed. I stayed there for a moment, just staring at the car. My car, the one I had built memories in, the one that made me feel like I finally existed in this family. And now it sat there, marked with someone else's life, someone else's priorities, like I had never belonged to it at all. I turned and walked toward the entrance, my heartbeat steady but heavy. I told myself I would handle this quietly, speak to my mom, fix it without causing a scene. What I didn't know was that she had already been telling her version of the story to everyone inside. The private dining room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and overlapping conversations. At the head of the long table sat my grandmother Margaret, elegant in deep navy, her silver hair swept back neatly, her posture as poised as ever. At 70, she still carried herself with the elegance of someone who had never learned to bend under pressure. Her posture was straight, her presence quiet but commanding, and her eyes missed absolutely nothing. I took my seat at the far end of the table, exactly where I always ended up, close enough to be included, far enough to be forgotten. The cousins around me chatted about things I barely followed. The first hour passed in polite conversation and appetizers. My Uncle Daniel stood up to give a toast, My Aunt Vivian followed with stories from years ago that made everyone laugh. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. In the middle of the main course, my grandmother's voice cut cleanly through the room. Leora, sweetheart. Every fork paused mid-air. I noticed you arrived alone. Where is that beautiful car we got you for your birthday? 40 heads turned toward me at once. I opened my mouth, but before I could say a word, my mother's voice rang out from across the table, smooth and confident. Oh. Leora gave it to Camilla. She smiled as if she had just announced something admirable. Camilla has little Mateo. You know, she needed something reliable for the baby. She glanced around at the relatives nearby, her smile widening. Leora is very understanding. She knows her sister needs it more. We're so proud of how generous she's become. Soft murmurs spread through the room. That's so kind. What a good sister. Family always comes first. I sat there frozen, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. She had just rewritten the truth, right in front of everyone. I hadn't given anything. It had been taken from me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to argue about. My grandmother hadn't looked away from me for a second. She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. You gave it away, Leora? She asked. Her voice was calm, too calm. Then she added, or was it taken? The murmurs stopped instantly. My mother's smile flickered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I felt the entire room shift. Mom. She let out a small, nervous laugh. What kind of question is that? Of course Leora gave it willingly. She's not a child. My grandmother didn't smile back. Slowly, deliberately. She set her fork down on the table. I'm asking Leora, she said, her voice steady. Not you. Evelyn. Every conversation in the room died. All eyes moved between the two of them, and then settled on me. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I glanced at my mother. Her expression was sharp. Warning. I looked at Camilla. She sat stiff, her face unreadable. Then I looked back at my grandmother. She didn't look away. No one asked me. I said. My voice was quieter than I expected. But it didn't shake. I was told Camilla was borrowing it for a week. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. My grandmother repeated slowly. I nodded, my chest tightening, but something in me pushing forward anyway. I tried to get it back. Mom said Camilla needed it more, because she has a family. I hesitated for a second, then forced the words out. Because I'm single. I swallowed. Because I'm flexible. The room went completely silent. My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is just a small family misunderstanding, she said quickly, forcing a smile. Nothing to worry about. Small. My grandmother's voice cut through hers like ice. A $30,000 car is a small matter. Someone gasped. I think it was Aunt Vivian. My mother's face drained of color. Mom, can we please talk about this privately? She said, her voice tightening. You made it public, my grandmother replied without hesitation, her gaze unwavering. You told everyone in this room that Leora gave away her car. She paused. If that isn't true, then the truth should be spoken in front of the same people. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. This wasn't the gentle woman who baked cookies and told soft stories about the past. This was someone else. Someone who had been watching everything. Quietly. Patiently. And now, finally, she had decided it was time to speak. My grandmother slowly turned to face my mother. Her movements calm, controlled, almost deliberate. Evelyn, she said, folding her hands neatly on the table. Let me ask you something. My mother's jaw tightened instantly. Mother, This isn't the time. Do you remember coming to me last year? Grandma continued, her voice steady, cutting right through the tension. Before Leora's birthday? Silence. My Uncle Daniel shifted in his seat. My Aunt Vivian leaned forward slightly, confusion written across her face. You asked me for money, my grandmother went on, her voice now carrying to every corner of the room. From the family trust. You said you wanted to buy Leora a car. A proper gift. You said. Something to show her that she mattered. My breath caught. I turned to look at my mother. The color had drained from her face completely. You said? Grandma continued, her eyes locking onto hers. That you wanted to do something special for your younger daughter, because you knew she often felt overlooked. A ripple of whispers spread across the table. I saw cousins exchanging glances. Julian stared down at his plate like he wished he could disappear into it. So tell me, my grandmother said, leaning forward slightly. What did you promise me in return for that money, Mother? Please, my mom said. Her voice strained now. This is not necessary. What did you promise? Grandma repeated. My mother pressed her lips together, her eyes flickering around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Evelyn. What is she talking about? Aunt Vivian asked softly. For the first time in my life. I watched my mother hesitate. Really hesitate. The confidence. The control she always carried. It was gone. And in that moment, something clicked in my mind. That car. It had never really been a gift from my parents. I'll tell you what she promised, my grandmother said, her voice now firm as steel. She promised that the car would belong to Leora. Only Leora. She signed an agreement stating exactly that. The room erupted into murmurs. That was just my mother began, her voice cracking. It was just a formality for the trust. The title of that car. My grandmother cut in sharply. Is in my name, not yours. Evelyn, not Leora's. Mine. The words hit me like the ground had suddenly disappeared beneath my feet. What I whispered. The words slipping out before I could stop it. My grandmother looked at me then, and for a brief second, her expression softened. I wanted to give you something meaningful, sweetheart, she said gently. But I know how your mother operates. Then her gaze returned to my mother. Cold again. So I kept the title in my name, and I made her sign an agreement stating that the car was exclusively yours. Camilla shot to her feet so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Wait. Grandma. I didn't know any of this, she said, her voice shaking. Mom told me Leora was fine with it. Did you ask her? The question cut through the room like a blade. Camilla froze. Did you call your sister? Grandma continued. Did you ask if you could have her car? Camilla's mouth opened, then closed. She looked helplessly between us. Mom said you didn't ask. Grandma finished for her. Then she nodded slowly. You assumed. You took. Just like you were taught. Julian reached for Camilla's arm, trying to guide her back into her seat. She resisted for a second, then sank down, her face crumbling. I sat there, completely still, watching everything unravel, every assumption, every lie, every carefully built version of reality my family had created, collapsing right in front of me. My grandmother had known all along. She had seen everything. She had prepared for this moment. And she wasn't finished yet. Daniel, she said, turning slightly toward my uncle. Did you bring what I asked for? My heart stopped. Before he could answer, my mother moved quickly, stepping away from her chair, her hands raised as if she could somehow contain what was happening. Everyone. Please, she said, forcing a strained smile. Let's not blow this out of proportion. My mother's voice softened, shifting into something calm, almost reasonable, like she was trying to regain control of the room. "This is just a family disagreement about a car," she said, looking around at everyone, making eye contact with relatives one by one. "That's all this is." She gestured lightly, as if explaining something obvious. "Leora works from home. She doesn't need to commute anywhere. Camilla has a toddler. She has to take him to daycare, to doctor's appointments, to Evelyn." My grandmother's voice was low, but it carried a warning. My mother ignored it. "I made a practical decision for my family," she continued, her confidence slowly returning. "Camilla has real responsibilities. Leora is young, single, flexible. She can adjust. That's what family does." A few heads around the table nodded. I saw my Aunt Carol lean toward her husband, whispering something under her breath. "And honestly," my mom added, her voice gaining strength, "I don't think we need to air private matters in front of everyone. This is between my daughters and me." Julian finally spoke up, his voice hesitant but trying to support her. "I agree," he said quietly. "This could be discussed later." Later. My grandmother let out a short, sharp laugh. "Evelyn has been discussing this later for 3 weeks," she said, her tone cutting, "while driving around in a car that doesn't belong to her daughter." "Mother. Please," my mom snapped, her calm beginning to crack. "You're embarrassing yourself." The room went completely still. My grandmother rose slowly from her chair, even at 70. She stood tall, her shoulders straight, her presence commanding without effort. "I'm embarrassing myself," she repeated, each word clear and deliberate. "You stole from your own child," she said, her voice steady but cold, and presented it as generosity. She paused, letting the words settle over the room. "And I'm the embarrassment." No one moved. I saw Aunt Vivian lift a hand to her mouth. Uncle Daniel was already reaching beneath the table, his expression tense. My mother had miscalculated. Badly. And then something in her snapped. "You know what?" she said suddenly, turning toward me, her finger pointing sharply in my direction. "This is your fault. Leora." I flinched. "You always do this," she continued, her voice rising. "You sit there quietly like a mouse, and then you act surprised when things don't go your way." "Evelyn." My dad tried to intervene. "No. Richard." She cut him off, her eyes wild now. "Someone needs to say it." Her gaze locked onto me. "You never speak up. You never participate. You just sit in the corner and expect everyone to read your mind." Each word hit harder than the last. "Camilla has been carrying this family," she went on. "She has a husband, a child, real responsibilities. And you." She let out a sharp breath. "You sit at home typing on your computer and call it a career." It felt like something inside my chest cracked open. "Your sister sacrifices every single day." She continued. "What do you sacrifice?" "Leora, nothing." "You give nothing." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not like this." "Sisters help each other," my mother said, her voice filled with righteous certainty. "Camilla needed that car. A good sister would have offered it without even being asked." "I would have," I said quietly. The words surprised even me. If someone had asked. "Don't play the victim," she snapped immediately. "It doesn't suit you." Camilla sat frozen, staring down at the tablecloth. Julian had his arm around her, but his eyes were fixed somewhere far away, like he wanted to disappear. I felt something inside me shift. I was seconds away from standing up, walking out, and never looking back. Then another voice cut through the tension. "That's enough. Evelyn." Everyone turned. Aunt Vivian was on her feet, Her face flushed with anger. "I sat through this exact treatment when we were kids," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I am not going to sit here and watch you do the same thing to your daughter." My mother's head snapped toward her. "Vivian, stay out of this." "No," she said firmly. "Not this time." She stepped forward, moving around the table until she stood beside my grandmother. "I was the flexible one in our house," she continued. Her eyes locked on my mother. "Remember that you got the bigger room, the nicer clothes, the later curfew." Her voice carried years of buried weight, and every time I complained, Mom and Dad told me to be more understanding. "That has nothing to do with this," my mother said through clenched teeth. "It has everything to do with this." Vivian replied. The room was completely silent now. "I spent years in therapy learning that what happened to me wasn't normal," she said, "and now I'm watching you do the exact same thing to Leora." Her gaze swept across the table. "She is not selfish for wanting her car back. She is not difficult. She is a person with basic boundaries." Camilla finally looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Aunt Vivian, I really didn't know." "Then you should have asked," Vivian said, not softening at all. "That's the point. You should have asked." Something shifted inside my chest. For the first time in my life, someone in my family was standing up for me. Someone actually understood. My grandmother reached out and placed a gentle hand on Vivian's arm. A quiet gesture of approval. "This isn't about a car anymore," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "This is about whether our family treats all its members with respect, or only the ones who demand it the loudest." She turned to look at me then, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen directed at me before. "Pride, Daniel," she said again, her voice steady. "The folder." No one interrupted this time. My uncle reached beneath the table and pulled out a plain manila envelope. It looked ordinary, almost forgettable, but the way my mother stared at it, it was like it held something dangerous. And in a way, it did. "Before I continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where your own family talked about you like you weren't even there, where they made decisions about your life and expected you to just accept it without a word? Would you have spoken up or stayed quiet like I did? Let me know in the comments. And if this story is pulling you in, don't forget to hit like, because what happened next changed everything." My Uncle Daniel stood and walked over to my grandmother, placing the envelope in her hands. Up close, it looked even more unremarkable. Just beige paper and a metal clasp. But my mother's voice had changed. "Mom," she said, and for the first time, there was something close to fear in it. "Whatever you're about to do, please, not here, not in front of everyone." My grandmother didn't hesitate. "You had 3 weeks to handle this privately." "Evelyn," she said calmly as she opened the envelope. 3 weeks to return the car, to apologize, to make it right." "I was going to," my mother said quickly. "Instead," Grandma continued, pulling out a stack of papers, "you stood in front of 40 people and told them Leora gave away her birthday gift." She laid the documents out across the white tablecloth. One by one, you turned theft into a story about generosity. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "So now the truth will be told in the same room, to the same audience." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes scanning the papers. They looked official, structured. There was a logo I recognized immediately. The Department of Motor Vehicles. "Daniel," my grandmother said, "read the first document." He picked up the top sheet, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. "Vehicle registration," he began. "State of California." He paused, scanning down the page. "Registered owner, Margaret Hale." A wave of gasps moved through the room. That's just for convenience. My mother stammered quickly. For tax purposes. People do that all the time. Do they? My grandmother asked, one eyebrow lifting slightly. Continue. My uncle picked up the next document, his expression shifting as he read through it silently first. This appears to be an agreement. He said slowly, read it. My grandmother replied, every word. The room went completely still. My mother's hands were trembling now. And suddenly, I understood. Uncle Daniel began reading again, his voice steady. Family Trust Disbursement Agreement, dated March 15th of last year. A whisper moved through the table. March. That's before her birthday. Someone murmured, I, Evelyn Kerr. He continued, hereby acknowledge receipt of $28,000 from the Hale Family Trust. 28,000, someone whispered under their breath. These funds are designated for the purchase of a vehicle as a birthday gift for my daughter, Leora Kerr. My chest tightened. I confirm that this vehicle will be registered in Margaret Hale's name, but will serve as the sole property of Leora Kerr for her personal use. My heart started pounding. Furthermore, he continued, I agree that this vehicle cannot be transferred, sold, loaned, or given to any other family member without the explicit written consent of Leora Kerr. He lowered the paper slowly. It's signed. He said, Evelyn Kerr, witnessed by... He squinted slightly. Daniel Hale. That's me. He looked up at my mother. I remember this. He said quietly, you told me it was standard trust paperwork. My mother looked like all the air had been pulled out of her. I didn't think it was $28,000, my grandmother said, her voice now cold as ice. From my trust. Given specifically for Leora. With conditions you agreed to in writing. At the other end of the table, I heard my Aunt Carol whisper to her husband. She signed a legal agreement. It sounds like it. He replied. Camilla was crying now, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Julian held on to her, but his eyes were fixed on the table, unmoving. My grandmother slowly looked around the room. Do you understand now? She asked. This was never a family car for Evelyn to redistribute however she pleased. This car, my grandmother continued, her voice steady, was Leora's property, funded by me, protected by contract. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the room, and Evelyn took it anyway. A ripple of tension moved through the table. There's more. She nodded toward my Uncle Daniel. He hesitated for a second, then reached back into the envelope and pulled out another sheet of paper. This one looked older, handwritten. The ink slightly faded. This appears to be a personal letter, he said slowly, examining it. Also signed by Evelyn. My mother let out a strained sound, almost like a protest. I don't see why that's necessary. Read it, my grandmother said. Every word. My uncle cleared his throat and began. Mother, I promise that the car purchased with your gift will remain Leora's and Leora's alone. The room fell into a silence so deep it felt suffocating. I understand that she has often felt overlooked in our family, he continued, his voice tightening slightly. And I want this gift to show her that she matters. My chest tightened painfully. I will never take this car from her or allow anyone else to use it without her explicit permission. His voice faltered for just a moment before finishing. I am grateful for your generosity and will honor this commitment. Your daughter, Evelyn. No one moved. No one spoke. I couldn't breathe. My mother had written those words. She had seen it. She had known exactly how I felt. She had promised to do better. And then she broke every single promise. That letter. My grandmother said slowly. Was your idea, Evelyn, not mine. My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. You wanted to put your commitment in writing, Grandma continued, to prove to me that you understood. She leaned forward slightly. So tell me, did you lie to me then? Or did you simply forget your promises the moment they became inconvenient? Aunt Vivian shook her head quietly, disgust written across her face. My Uncle Daniel set the papers down like they burned his hands. Camilla was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, how could you? She whispered. You told me Leora didn't care about the car. I thought it would be fine, my mother burst out, her voice finally cracking. She never complains. She never had to. My grandmother's words landed like a final judgment. That was the whole point. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Camilla stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her mascara had smudged, her expression raw and shaken. Grandma, I swear, I didn't know, she said, her voice trembling. Mom told me Leora said yes. She said it made more sense for me to have it because of Mateo. My grandmother looked at her, her expression unreadable. And you believe that? She said. Camilla nodded weakly. Without question, I did. Did you call your sister? Grandma asked. Did you text her? Did you ask how she felt? Camilla opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You didn't, Grandma said quietly. She gave a small, slow nod. Because it was easier not to ask. Easier to accept what benefited you, and assume everyone else would be fine with it. Julian shifted uncomfortably beside her. Margaret, he said cautiously, maybe we should discuss this somewhere more private. Private. My grandmother let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Your mother-in-law stood in front of 40 people and announced Leora's generosity, she said. She made a public statement. A false one. Her gaze swept across the room. This was made public. So it will be resolved publicly. Several relatives nodded quietly. I felt Aunt Vivian's hand reach under the table and squeeze mine gently. Leora didn't give anything away, my grandmother said, her voice rising just enough to fill the room. She was robbed by her own mother and sister, and then made to feel guilty for objecting. Leora, I'm so sorry. Camilla turned to me, tears still falling. I really am. I should have asked. For the first time that night, I saw something different in her face. Not entitlement, not assumption. Something closer to shame, but I couldn't respond. Not yet. Because my grandmother was already reaching for one last document, and I knew we weren't finished. She rose slowly from her chair, standing at the head of the table, dressed in deep navy. She looked less like a grandmother, and more like someone about to deliver a final verdict. Here is what will happen, she said. Her voice left no room for argument. The car will be returned to Leora tonight, before anyone leaves this restaurant. My mother's head snapped up immediately. Tonight. But Camilla needs Camilla. My grandmother interrupted calmly, turning toward her. Can arrange her own transportation like every other adult. Then she held out her hand slightly. Camilla, the keys. Now. For a brief second. I thought she might argue. I saw her jaw tighten, her fingers curl slightly against the table. Julian's hand pressed gently against her shoulder. And then, she gave in. Slowly. She reached into her purse, when she pulled out the keychain. My breath caught. It was mine. The small silver compass charm I had bought at a flea market just a week after getting the car. I hadn't even realized how much that tiny detail mattered, until I saw it again. She stood up and walked toward me, each step heavy, like she was carrying something far bigger than a set of keys. I'm sorry, Leora, she said softly. her voice barely above a whisper. I really am. She placed the keys into my hand. The metal was still warm. Familiar. Mine. My car. My choice. Mine again. Thank you, I said quietly. 2 words. That was all I could manage. My grandmother gave a small nod, satisfied. Then she turned her attention back to my mother. And Evelyn, she said, her voice firm once more. You owe your daughter an apology. Not for the car. She paused. For the way you've treated her. For making her invisible in her own family. My mother stood frozen. Her face was a storm of emotions. Shame, anger, defiance, fear. Evelyn. My grandmother repeated. The entire room held its breath. For perhaps the first time in her life. My mother had nowhere to go. Her face flushed deep red. Leora, she said finally. The word tight. Forced. I apologize. I should have asked you before letting Camilla use the car. That was it. A technical apology. Empty. My grandmother's eyes narrowed slightly. That's your apology, she asked. For 3 weeks of taking what wasn't yours. For lying to everyone in this room. For humiliating your daughter in front of her entire family. I said I was sorry. My mother snapped. You said words. My grandmother replied calmly. There's a difference. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could hear someone's watch ticking from across the table, but something inside me had changed. Over the past hour, I had watched my mother lie, deflect, blame, and finally crumble under the truth. And I realized something important. I didn't need a perfect apology. I needed boundaries. Mom, I said, standing up slowly, the keys still in my hand. I accept your apology. Relief flickered across her face for a split second. But you need to understand something. I kept my voice steady, controlled, the same tone I used when dealing with difficult clients. From now on, anything that involves me, my life, my time, my property, you ask me directly. I met her eyes, not through Camilla, not through Dad, me, Leora. I've always. No, I said calmly. You don't decide for me anymore. Silence filled the room. I'm not the flexible one. I continued. I'm not the backup option. I held her gaze. I'm your daughter, and I deserve to be asked. No one spoke. No one moved. My grandmother was watching me, and in her eyes, I saw it again. That same look. Pride. Real. Unfiltered. Unconditional. That's my granddaughter, she said softly. And for the first time in 24 years, I felt like I actually existed in this family. But she wasn't finished. She waited until I sat back down, then turned her attention to the rest of the table. There is one more matter, she said. My mother let out a quiet, frustrated sound under her breath. The Hale family trust. My grandmother continued, folding her hands calmly. As most of you know, your grandfather established this trust before he passed. It was meant to support future generations of this family. Several heads nodded. This was something everyone knew. Until now. She went on. I have managed that trust through my children. Evelyn, Daniel, and Vivian. They would submit requests, and I would approve or deny them. She paused. That ends today. My mother's head snapped up. What from this point forward? My grandmother said, her voice firm. I will work directly with each grandchild. No intermediaries. No parents deciding who is more deserving than someone else. Her gaze moved slowly across the table, landing on each of us. You are all adults, she said. You can speak for yourselves. My Uncle Daniel nodded slowly. That seems fair. More than fair. Aunt Vivian added quietly. My mother looked like she had just been struck. "Mom, you can't just do that," she said, her voice unsteady. "The trust has always been managed through you." My grandmother raised an eyebrow. "So you could decide which of your daughters deserve support?" she asked calmly. "So you could take money meant for Leora and redirect it to Camilla, because you believed she was more worthy?" My mother said nothing, not a single word. "I've watched how you treat your children." "Evelyn?" My grandmother continued, her voice carrying across the entire room. "All of you." She let that settle before finishing. "And I've decided my grandchildren deserve better than being filtered through their parents' favoritism." I glanced at Camilla. For a brief moment. Our eyes met. There was something unfamiliar there. Not competition. Not resentment. Something quieter. Uncertain. But real. In that moment, I realized something had shifted. The power structure of our family had changed. And my mother was no longer the one in control. I still remember the silence that followed. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. Like everyone was trying to process what had just happened. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own family, who holds the power, who makes the decisions, and who gets overlooked, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. I share new ones every week. The party ended not long after that. Not officially. People still stayed. There was cake, a round of happy birthday, photos taken with forced smiles, but the energy in the room had completely drained. It felt like everything had already ended. My parents left first. No goodbye, no eye contact, just a quiet, quick exit. Camilla and Julian followed soon after, Mateo asleep in his arms. At the door, she paused. She looked back at me for a second and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I gave a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I stepped outside a few minutes later and found myself standing beside my car. My car. I ran my fingers slowly along the door handle, grounding myself in something that was finally, undeniably mine again. "You okay, sweetheart?" I turned to see Aunt Vivian walking toward me. "I don't know," I admitted, letting out a small, breathless laugh. "Is this what normal feels like? I've been invisible for so long? I forgot." She didn't hesitate. She pulled me into a hug. It was warm, tight, real. The kind of hug I hadn't realized I'd been missing. "You did the right thing tonight," she said softly. "Standing up for yourself, that takes courage." "Grandma did most of the work," I replied. "She set the stage," Vivian said, pulling back slightly and placing her hands on my shoulders. "But you stepped onto it." Her eyes softened. "I'm proud of you, Leora, and I'm proud of who you're becoming." My Uncle Daniel came out shortly after. He shook my hand with a small, knowing smile. "Welcome to the club," he said. "The not the favorite club. Meetings are every Tuesday." I laughed. For the first time that night. I actually laughed. My grandmother was the last one to leave. She walked out slowly, waving off offers of help like she always did. "Drive safe, sweetheart," she said, gently patting my cheek. "Grandma." "Thank you," I said, my voice quieter now. She smiled, her eyes warm. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just promise me one thing. What, never be the flexible one again?" I nodded. "I promise." I drove home alone that night. Windows down, music playing, the city lights passing by. Everything felt different. 2 weeks passed. Silence. No calls from my mother, no messages from Camilla. My dad sent one awkward text. "Hope you're doing okay. I replied with a thumbs up emoji and nothing more. And then, one Tuesday evening, my phone lit up. Mom. I stared at her name on the screen as it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, I answered. Leora. Her voice was carefully neutral. I think we should talk. Okay, I said. I don't want this family to fall apart over a car. She continued with a heavy sigh. It was a misunderstanding. Can we just move past it? A misunderstanding? You know what I mean, she added quickly. Things got out of hand. I shouldn't have brought it up at the party, and your grandmother shouldn't have either. I stayed quiet for a second, because I noticed what she didn't say. No acknowledgement of what she had done, no admission that she had taken something from me, that she had lied about it, that she had humiliated me. Mom, I said slowly, I'm willing to talk. But you need to understand good, she cut in. Actually, before we meet, I wanted to ask you something. There it was. Has your grandmother talked to you about the trust she asked? About what she plans to do now that she's handling it directly? I felt something in my chest tighten. If you want to know about the trust, you should ask her. I replied, I'm asking you. She insisted. Has she said anything about distributions, about what the grandchildren might receive? And just like that, I understood. This wasn't about me. It never had been. Mom, I said, my voice steady now. If the only reason you're calling is to find out whether I'm getting money from Grandma, then this conversation is over. Leora, that's not when you want to talk about what actually happened, I said. Cutting her off this time, I'll be here. I didn't wait for her response. I hung up. Some things I was learning couldn't be fixed with a phone call. About a month after the party, Camilla texted me. Not about the car, not about Grandma, not about the trust or the fight or anything that had happened. Just a simple message. Can we get coffee? I need to talk. Really talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the quiet, fragile peace I had finally started to build. But another part of me, a quieter part, remembered that Camilla hadn't chosen to be the favorite any more than I had chosen to be overlooked. So I said yes. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. She looked different, tired, worn down, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Nothing like the polished version of her I had grown up comparing myself to. Thanks for meeting me, she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. We sat in silence for a moment. I've been thinking a lot since the party, she said finally. About everything. About how I never question things. How I just take. Camila. Let me finish, she said gently. Her eyes met mine. I was always the priority, she continued. I got used to it. I never stopped to think about what that meant for you. She swallowed hard. Mom made it easy not to think. She handled everything, made all the decisions, told me what to believe. And you believed her, I said quietly. I did. She admitted. Because it was convenient? Tears filled her eyes. I'm not blaming Mom. I'm an adult. I should have asked you about the car, about everything. Something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something softer. I don't need you to be perfect. Camilla, I said slowly. I just need you to ask, to actually see me. That's all I've ever wanted. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm trying, she said. I really am. It wasn't a solution, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, my relationship with my grandmother Margaret had changed in a way I didn't expect. Every Sunday afternoon, I drove my SUV. My SUV with the little silver compass charm back on the keys. To her house. Not quietly, not secretly, openly, proudly. We would sit in her garden or in her sunlit kitchen. Drinking tea she insisted on preparing the proper way. She would tell me stories. About my grandfather. About their early years. About the family before everything became complicated. One afternoon, while she was tending to her roses, she glanced at me and smiled. "Do you know why I like you so much, Leora?" "Because I'm your favorite," I teased. She laughed softly. "No," she said, "because you remind me of me." I set my cup down. "What do you mean?" She gently adjusted a white rose, turning it toward the sunlight. "I was the flexible one too," she said quietly. "The youngest girl in a house full of brothers. I learned to be invisible, to take what I was given and never ask for more." Her voice softened. "Your grandfather was the first person who really saw me." She smiled faintly, lost in the memory. "He told me I was wasting myself by being small. He made me promise I would never shrink again." I thought about all the years I had spent doing exactly that, making myself smaller so everyone else could take up more space. "I wish someone had told me that sooner," I said. She looked at me, her eyes bright. "I'm telling you now." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "I didn't have someone in my corner when I needed it." She said, "That's why I'm in yours." I hugged her then. Really hugged her. The way I should have years ago. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered. "Don't thank me," she said, patting my back gently. "Just keep being exactly who you are. That's all the thanks I need. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn, but they're worth every second." So where do things stand now? My relationship with my mom is complicated. We talk, but carefully. She knows there are boundaries now, lines she can't cross anymore. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the mother I wish she had always been, moments that make me wonder what things could have been like if she had chosen differently. But I don't wait for her to change anymore. I've stopped expecting her to see me the way I always needed to be seen. That part I had to let go of. Camilla and I are rebuilding things slowly. Not perfectly, not all at once, but step by step. She's learning to ask instead of assuming, and I'm learning to believe that when she asks. She actually wants to understand. We'll probably never be the kind of sisters who share everything or talk every day. But now, we're honest with each other, and that's something we never had before. My dad stays neutral, like he always has. He doesn't take sides, doesn't step in, and I've come to accept that, even if I don't fully agree with it. Silence, I've learned, is its own kind of decision. And my grandmother, she gave me the most important lesson of my life. Being flexible doesn't mean being invisible. Keeping the peace doesn't mean losing yourself. I'm 25 now. I have my own apartment, my own career, my own car. With that small silver compass still hanging from the keys. And every week, I sit across from a 70-year-old woman who refuses to let me shrink. I'm not the flexible one anymore. I'm the one with boundaries. There was a time I thought staying quiet meant keeping peace, that being easy to deal with was a strength. But this experience taught me something far more real. If you don't protect your own voice, someone else will decide your worth for you. What hurt me most wasn't losing the car. It was realizing how easily my feelings were dismissed simply because I didn't fight back. And maybe that's something you've felt too. If you were in my place, would you have spoken up sooner? Or waited like I did? What changed my life wasn't anger. It was finally setting a boundary and standing by it. That moment didn't just change how my family saw me. It changed how I saw myself. And that shift is something no one can take away. If you've stayed with me until the end, I really want to know, did this story resonate with you in any way? Thank you for listening, truly. And if you feel like this message could help someone else find their voice, you can be the reason they hear it. A simple like, a comment, or a share from you might reach someone who needs this exact story today. If you choose to subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping stories like this spread and make a difference.